Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's going to be comparing the Ram RHO to the Ram RHO to see if the RHO is really worth the extra money. Before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Larry Miller Dodge Ram here in Sandy for giving me some time with both of these trucks. Both of these are currently available for sale, so if you're interested, link to their website in the description down below. Link to my car buying guide as well. Let's get into it. Under the hood, we have a twin-turbo 3-liter inline-6 that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy 17 around town and then 24 on the highway, with power outputs being 420 horsepower and then 469 pound-feet of torque. Now the RHO has the same powertrain kind of. It's the high output version, so more horsepower, 540 and then 521 pound-feet of torque. Fuel economy is lower. Part of that's because of the high output, part of that's because of the tire setup. Anyways, 14 around town, 16 on the highway. Before we move forward with this comparison, I do want to mention if you can see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. So at a quick glance, the front ends, especially to the untrained eye, are going to look very similar on both of these trucks, but there are some key differences. So although both of them have fake vents on the top, you can see the RHO has that center hood vent with the marker lights, which makes it look a lot more aggressive. The pattern here with the grille is also slightly different with both of the trucks. And then if you look at the rear bumper, the elements are the same, you know, fog lights, tow hooks, skid plate, all of that. The RHO bumper, though, is a little bit more aggressive with its front end approach angle. And then you got the hollow Ram logo versus the filled in with the Rebel. But yeah, again, to the untrained eye, they look shockingly similar. What's definitely not similar is the tire and wheel setup. So the Rebel, 18-inch wheels, 33s. The RHO, 18-inch wheels and 35s. The RHO also has the wide body kit on it. So you've got these large, wide fenders and fender flares, whereas the Rebel, yeah, it's got the standard body with the Ram. Now, both of these, you can get the trailer mirrors on it, or you can get the smaller mirrors, whichever you prefer. The RHO also has that cool vent there on the side. And then shocks is going to be another big difference. So the RHO has an active system. It's the Bilstein Blackhawk shocks. Now, the Rebel does still have Bilstein shocks. You can see it in blue there, but this is an inactive system, and I'll kind of talk about these shocks more while we are driving. Now, here's your side view with the Rebel, and then here's your side view with the RHO. Now, I'm not going to go over the bed elements because they're going to be the same with both of the trucks. What is a little bit different is going to be the taillights. So with the RHO, it has the new fancy pants taillights that kind of fill in, and they just look a little bit nicer. And then the rear bumper is also going to be a little bit different. You can see the beefy recovery points as well as the exhaust tips. And then with the Rebel, you've got the more baseline lights here in the rear. You can see the bumper is a little bit more rounded off. Again, less aggressive with the departure there. And then you got cool looking exhaust tips, but just less aggressive overall with that. And so that's the rear, and I'm actually going to quickly show you guys the headlights on both because that's another difference. So again, the Rebel basically just has the normal baseline headlights, whereas the RHO, as you can see, it looks a lot more intricate off and then on. Yeah, it fills in, so that's also an added benefit. Now the cab space is going to be the same between the two because they're the same truck basically, but the interior is going to be quite a bit different. So with the RHO, you can see it's very heavily stylized. I mean, look at the trim there. This one's loaded up, so you got massaging seats with it, and then you've got these seats out of a limited, a little bit more aggressive. Now you can get these seats in a loaded up Rebel. That is something to note, and we'll talk about kind of a loaded up Rebel versus an RHO again later in this video. But you got like power adjustable pedals. Getting in, you got to step up quite a bit. Side steps, I'd recommend them. Cool digital gauge cluster here. We got a heads-up display. We got these fancy paddles here on the back of the steering wheel. Radio controls below it. And then you've got stuff like a 360 camera system with this. None of that's really unique to the RHO, actually. What is unique is the launch control, which is pretty cool. You also have the advanced four-wheel drive system. It's not unique, but it's a nice feature to have. You got the RHO specific drive modes as well. See RHO here on the center console. And you got more nice trim here as well. Shifter in the center. And then you can see the nice trim on the dash. We got a camera rear view mirror and then a panoramic sunroof. So basically this is a fully loaded Ram interior. Now popping over to the Rebel, this is more entry level with the interior, so it shows you how different they can be. But like I said, you can get the same seats in the Rebel as you have in the RHO if you get a GT package, for example. And then popping in, it's easier to get in, not nearly as high. Same thing with the steering wheel. So this is like the standard Rebel steering wheel, but you can get the RHO steering wheel with the paddle shifters with the GT package. We'll turn it on. Still have a digital gauge cluster with the Rebel, which is cool. You can option out a heads-up display. You can option out the camera rear view mirror. You can option out a sunroof in the Rebel. All of that. Same thing with like 360 camera. This one just has a standard, but you can option out the 360 camera. You do still get a rear locking differential and advanced four-wheel drive system. Notice this has the dial shifter. If you get the GT package, you get shifter here in the center. You can also get a passenger screen if you want, or you can have this whole kind of setup here with the trim on the dash with a, again, quote-unquote, lower down package. Now, something to note, you can get a base RHO. It's not going to have these seats exactly, but it's going to be kind of more like this Rebel. Now, here's where things get interesting, in my opinion. So that RHO is about $85,000. This Rebel, as spec'd out, is just under $70,000. But something to note, if you do a fully loaded Rebel with the GT package, you're the same price as that RHO. So if you actually load up the Rebel with all the goodies that the RHO has, pricing's the same. So let's take them out and let's talk about it. Now, I was gonna do exhaust clips in this video, but then I kind of decided that they both sound like vacuum cleaners, so we just won't today. Shots fired. So, Rebel versus RHO. This is a question as old as time. Well, as old as Ram has had two off-road trucks. And, well, there actually are benefits to the Rebel, believe it or not. I know some people are gonna be like, just RHO, but let's talk about the benefits. So first off, because this is standard body, it drives small for a full-size pickup truck. Still a big full-size pickup truck, but you know, you don't feel like you're heaving around nearly as, because you aren't nearly as big of a vehicle as the RHO, right? The RHO is a big beast. Now the next thing is the ride quality on road is actually really good with the Rebel. So what these Bilstein shocks do is they firm things up a little bit so that the truck handles better, but they also handle the larger compression that you might experience on road, like think about going through a pothole and stuff. So overall, leads to a nice controlled ride. So I think that that is a plus overall. Powertrain's smooth. This new Hurricane's got good low-end torque. And I've done fuel economy tests with the new Hurricane, both standard output and high output. And I've found that I've gotten pretty good fuel economy in both of them. As good as the EPA suggests in the standard output, and then the high output better than the EPA. So I'm wondering what those RHOs are actually going to get. Because, you know, it's rated for 14, 16, but I bet it's going to, I bet in the real world, people are probably going to get closer to like 17, 18 miles per gallon. That's just my guess. So the Rebel, again, solid with the ride quality, still a nice interior. And again, you can load this up if you want. Just gets into RHO pricing, which is a very interesting predicament once you're up into RHO territory. Okay, that person's turning. Still a big beast though. You can see the turn, you kind of swing a little bit wider, but it's not bad. Now the next thing I want to mention about these shocks is going to be longevity. So whenever you have fixed shocks, they just last longer for on-road use. You don't have to, basically you never rebuild shocks like this. You pretty much just run them, and let's get acceleration. Oh, no traction. Still no traction. The back end is like going all over the place. Anyways, with these shocks, you basically just ride them out until they are no longer in existence, and then you get new shocks. And they're a lot more affordable when you have to replace them. So that's the benefit of a fixed system, is it lasts longer for on-road driving compared to an active system that has to be rebuilt quite a bit more often. And in terms of those Blackhawk shocks, I don't know what the recommended rebuild time is, but I did review a TRX for like 100,000 miles, and it seemed like the shocks still performed pretty darn well. So those Blackhawk shocks are really good, but that's just a key difference to note, is fixed shocks like this tend to last longer, and the replacement cycle is basically, the fixing cycle is basically just replacing them once they die, and that's not too bad because fixed shocks are really not all that expensive. RHO. I will say, I like the smell of the leather. It's definitely a nice smell. So, right off the bat, feels bigger, right? It's quite a bit wider. The Rebel is sub 80 inches. This is I think like 85, 86 inches wide, not counting the mirrors. I mean, it's a big beast. That's why it's got the marker lights. They are federally mandated. Now the steering also feels quite a bit different with the RHO. The steering in this is a bit heavier. I wouldn't say, well, it's actually kind of more direct. So that's an interesting thing to note. Now, something else to note about active shocks, we're talking about a lot about shocks today, but I've learned a lot about different types of shocks as I've owned them and experienced them. These active shocks, sometimes, especially in the cold, as they're kind of warming up and everything, they can make some interesting sounds. So if the shocks make some interesting sounds, it doesn't necessarily mean that the truck's broken or anything like that. It just means sometimes that they are kind of warming up and getting used to everything. But, oof, tons of torque. Now, in terms of like just around town driving like this, the high output doesn't really feel any more powerful than the standard output. It's not until you really get into the throttle that you feel the extra power. So if this is most of your driving is just dinking around town and then occasionally, dinking around on the highway, you might not feel too much benefit with the high output, other than, on ramp, right? On ramp, you'll definitely feel a benefit. But something else to note is, yeah, threading the needle sometimes in traffic with this. Like with the Rebel, I could have just went, but this, you gotta think a little bit more with the width. Now, with comfort, I wouldn't say that it's actually it's not more comfortable on road than the Rebel. Because of the shocks being kind of more Baja style, it does that kind of floating. So compression's great, right? That's what you want the truck to do, is you want the suspension to kind of go over the place. But on road, the Rebel just straight, right? This, you can kind of feel things moving around a little bit more. So I wouldn't say that that's uncomfortable or jarring, but it makes it so this is not any more comfortable, even though it technically has better compression. Now this is full-time four-wheel drive, whereas the Rebel has two-wheel drive, so this just puts down the power right away. There is no, tires fighting with the traction control system like with the Rebel. So in summary, with this comparison, I think that both of these trucks are really cool. In terms of which one you should go for, I think that because of where Ram has priced the Rebel, the RHO makes more sense. That being said, the Rebel still has the benefit of slightly higher payload capacity, slightly higher towing capacity than the RHO. I mean, you're looking at like, it's going to depend on how you package things out, but usually about 1,300 versus 1,500 on the payload. And then towing capacity, you're going to look at like around 8,000 versus 10,000 pounds. So that is a difference. That is a substantial difference with both of the trucks. So that is something to consider. If you need to do more truck stuff, well, the Rebel's going to fit the bill more than the RHO. Let me know which one you go for, but for me, yeah, still Team RHO personally.